I think I tend to want to tell people, want to just give solutions. And I think that a lot of times being a good leader is just about listening and being empathetic. Sometimes people aren't telling you something because they want your help solving the problem. They just kind of want you to listen and be empathetic. And, and I think often as a leader, you think that people want to hear from you. But really, a lot of times it's just they want to be heard.
Welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. We're here to bring you the latest and greatest from the Silicon Valley, where unicorns roam and innovation never sleeps. We've got top investors, superstar founders, and well-known tech executives lined up to share their secrets on building and investing in successful companies. Just a quick disclaimer, while we may sound like financial geniuses, but please don't mistake us for your friendly neighborhood financial advisors. So let's get started and dive into the wild world of tech entrepreneurship. Our sponsor, Alumni Ventures, offers individual investors access to venture investing through its diversified, professional-grade venture portfolios. The company's funds have consistently outperformed public market equivalents with over $1.1 billion raised and invested in over 1,100 portfolio companies. They have a dedicated team of 50 full-time venture investors and were the #1 most active venture firm in the US in 2022 and number 3 globally according to PitchBook. Investing in venture capital can help reduce the overall portfolio risk and increase the likelihood of stronger returns. To learn more, visit av.vc/grace, that's av.vc/grace, and schedule a call. Investors must be accredited. Please note that all financial investments involve risk. Past performance does not guarantee future results, and it is important to conduct your own research and seek professional advice before making any investment decisions. Now, please enjoy the show. Hi, David. Thank you so much for coming to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Grace.
Okay, so you were an English major in college, and then you worked in various companies in e-commerce, and you work at eBay, and then ReVOLVE is like one of my favorite ones. And later on, you started Happy Returns, and now you're the VP of PayPal. To start the show, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about how you grew up and then your experience early on in your career that shaped you into who you are today.
So I love that you asked about being an English major. That was a really important part of my time at Dartmouth. And coming out of Dartmouth, when I did, if you wanted a job, they basically said, come to this meeting. It was the corporate recruiting meeting. Mm-hmm. And, I remember they basically said, look to your left, look to your right, one of you will have a job. And then they said, here are your options. You can be a banker or you can be a consultant. You can live in Boston or you could live in New York. And as an English major, I thought, okay, well, I guess that means I'm a consultant. I've always disliked the Red Sox. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll be a consultant in New York. And so that was everything that I applied to through the corporate recruiting process. And lo and behold, I landed a job as a consultant in New York. And, it was great from a learning skills perspective. It was great in terms of just understanding what a job was and what a career was, but it definitely was not something I was super passionate about. My next career opportunity is really something that I think kind of has shaped my path. And that was that I landed at a startup called Free Markets. And I'm going to date myself, but this was late 90s, back when the internet was a new thing. And it was, I joined in 1997. I was employee number 30. We ended up growing to about 1,500 people with offices, across the world. We ended up going public in December 1999, so sort of right at the frothy peak market. But it was just a great experience, and I think it was really where I understood the joy of being an entrepreneur, and I got to sort of see this story up close. And I think, a couple of things that I learned from that, one was the values of the company really were a reflection of the founders. And, I guess I'd always sort of thought a company is different than people. And it was very clear in this place, no, there is no difference between what we value as a business and what we value as people. It was really just, this is kind of who we are and how we operate. The other was that, work can and should be fun. And we really did have a great time. And so, I went to business school that was kind of my mental model was, I want to do something entrepreneurial. I want to kind of land in tech. It was a tech startup, pre-business school. And so that was really what I was seeking after business school. That was probably, really formative experience. The other kind of post-business school was I worked at eBay. The big lesson there was really just sort of the value of your network and the relationships that you make, and the fact that you're going to run into all of these people later in your career, right? And when I kind of think about, between the 20 years since business school, like so many of my career experiences have been influenced by people that I met at eBay. Contacts from there helped me land jobs. Our first investor in Happy Returns was an eBay alum. Some of our advisors were eBay alums. Our interim CMO was an eBay contact. And so it was really kind of, the value of the relationships that you make and the fact that careers are long and chances are you're going to see all these people again.
Who is on your personal board of advisors when it comes to like career development?
Well, my wife probably would be the chairman of the board. I think she expects me to be the best version of myself, like both life and career. And I think it's very helpful to have someone in your corner. Sam Kinney, who is the co-founder of Free Markets, also a Dartmouth and Tuck alum like me. He's someone who's been a mentor. He was an early investor in Happy Returns. He actually served as our interim CFO for a little bit. And then kind of two other folks, Greg Bettinelli, who I worked with at eBay, and then I worked for at Outlook. And then he was the investor at Upfront Ventures who led our seed funding and our Series A. Really kind of the first person to believe in Happy Returns. He's someone that I absolutely, think about and, would talk to before any career change. And then another, person from Happy Returns, Brian Spaley. Brian is a multi-time successful entrepreneur, co-founder of Bonobos, CEO of Trunk Club. He ended up joining our board as an independent director. He invested in our seed, joined as an independent director, and he's the guy that like you can count on to essentially just tell you the truth. When not always just very directly. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but often you kind of need it. And he's someone that is unafraid to kind of tell me if I'm whining or tell me if I'm like I can always count on him to give me the unvarnished message,
like real advice
that maybe I need to hear at the moment.
What is one skill that you're constantly trying to get better at?
Listening. I think I tend to want to tell people, I want to just give solutions. And I think that a lot of times being a good leader is just about listening and being empathetic. Sometimes people aren't telling you something because they want your help solving the problem. They just kind of want you to listen and be empathetic. And, and I think like often as a leader, you think that people want to hear from you, but really a lot of times it's just, they want to be heard. And so understanding that balance, really just trying to hear, and sometimes it's about not only about what they're saying, but about sort of the why. And so I think, being a better listener is a skill that it's probably a lifelong journey to become a better listener.
One of like my favorite experience of yours is the CMO of ReVOLVE. ReVOLVE kind of like shaped the entire Instagram model marketing industry, and you are the CMO of it. And I'm curious, what was your experience working there, and why do you feel like it was like such a successful company that kind of pioneered this kind of influencer modeling era for like retail?
Two things really stand out from that. One is it's really well run, very disciplined. Which I think is, ReVOLVE, I believe, has been profitable every year since its founding. And I think, did not take venture money, did not follow the path that many of the other companies you mentioned did. And I think, as a result, needed to build a business that could sustain itself. The other, I think, and you mentioned kind of the influencer marketing piece. I think Revolve really understands its customer, maybe better than any company on the planet. And the relationship, I think, is really authentic. And so like when I joined, the idea of influencer marketing was kind of a new thing. It was like, oh, maybe we can find some, folks with big Instagram followings and get them to promote our brand. For Revolve, it was literally just like, hey, these are our friends. These are people that already shop the site. These are people that already come to our parties. So it was like, it never felt like, oh, we're going to influencer market. It was just, oh, let's promote the relationships that we have. And I think that authenticity, you can feel it, right? It never feels like people are, promoting Revolve because they're getting paid. It feels like they're promoting Revolve because they like its point of view and they enjoy the brands and they, love coming to the parties and they it's a lifestyle that represents kind of who they are. And I think it's hard. That kind of authenticity is rare. And I think that's really at the heart of what makes that brand special.
Totally. What were they doing there? Because from an outsider, a non-influencer perspective, we can only see the influencer will tag Revolve on Instagram and I know that there's influencer discount on things or / they get free products, which is kind of like a standard nowadays for any influencer related companies. So I'm curious, what were they doing differently to make it profitable, like you said, and then create these kind of authentic relationships?
Well, a couple of things that I think were, really noticeable or notable about the business model. So one is, Revolve tends to be kind of at the front of trends, but it's hard to get that right all the time. And so from a buying perspective, they would often buy very wide, meaning a lot of assortment, but very shallow in terms of the inventory. And then we're very data driven around what's selling. So, it's hard to know which of these 10 trends are going to really hit, but let's pay attention to what is moving. And then let's try to invest as much as we can in the things that are working. And so I think, that idea of really being nimble in your supply chain and your inventory, was really unique to them. The other, they never burden themselves with the massive costs that I think a lot of venture funded startups do. Revolve's based in Cerritos. The office when I worked there was, part of a warehouse. It was really, let's keep costs reasonable. Let's not go have some big, beautiful office and, it was really let's focus on trying to build a sustainable business. Because what that gives you is flexibility, right? It means that you can pace your growth. It means that you can decide where to invest. It means that you're not beholden to, the notion of some, venture capitalist that thinks you have to grow X% or what. It was literally just, let's control our destiny and let's do that by being smart about how we invest, our money.
I believe it was before Revolve, you work at Outlook and then where you met your co-founder and then later on you started Happy Returns. And in terms of when you were starting the company, what were some KPIs you established for yourself and for the company to get it off the ground?
So I'd really credit my co-founder, Mark Geller, for this, what I'm about to describe, which was, this idea of sort of working backward, so as the CEO, gosh, it seems like you wear a lot of hats. It seems like you have a lot of jobs, but really the job's really simple. It's just don't run out of money. Right? I mean, literally that's the only thing that matters is don't run out of money. Right. So then, what I think Mark and I did, and again, I really credit, his kind of clear and disciplined thinking is kind of working backward to say, okay, well, when will we run out of money? So how much time do we have? Right. What story do we need to be able to tell the next time we go to raise money? What milestones are going to be part of that story? And then kind of working from that, what metrics do we need to have as proof points to show that those, to illustrate those milestones? And then from there, everything just sort of falls out. It's like, okay, well, if we have to have, X in sales, where are we today? What's the gap? Do we have the right skill set and the right people here to actually go accomplish that? And so it's sort of like, if you kind of work backward from, from that next time we have to raise money, it's very focusing, and it allows you to be really disciplined, because startups tend to die because they try to do too many things. When you're hyper focused on like, okay, we have to accomplish this to get to the point that we can raise the next round, it allows you to just filter a lot of stuff out. And that's probably like the hardest part of the job, is like filtering out the noise and just staying focused on the signal. The signal, again, really simple. It's just like, don't run out of money, right? Because if you run out of money, the story's over, and you're like most startups which fail.
You've been running the company for over 7 years. Throughout the 7 years, how many different stages do you feel like the startup have been through before? I mean, we can use like the hardcore milestone, for example, acquired by, 2021, June, and then like, that's like an example. But like, or we could use you as a CEO, like growing from like 2 people team to, 10 people to like however many you guys are having right now. Or maybe we could talk about like the client side of things. For example, Everlane was your client, or like entering FedEx, or like entering these big stores could be a milestone. I'm curious, how many different milestones do you feel like you have been through? And how do you set like a realistic goal for your company? And do you look at the competitors, or how do you benchmark your success throughout the time that you are running the company?
That's a great question. I haven't really thought about it in phases. I guess if I had to kind of break it, into them, I think there's sort of the early phase when you're just like figuring out, like, can this work, right? Is this feasible? And there it's just, can we kind of create proof points to know that we're actually delivering something of value? And so in our case, it was, will shoppers return this way, and will they have a good experience, right? Can we deliver foot traffic into our location partners? And then can we actually save some money for the merchants that are trusting us with this relationship, right? So it was really just about kind of establishing those proof points. Then I think there was like a next phase, which was like, okay, you can do this, it works, but can you actually scale it? And that's very different, right? Because that sort of really starts to get into like, do you have a viable business model, right? And do your unit economics work? And if you can do this with one, retailer that trusts you, and often, those early customers were personal relationships. It's like, okay, can you figure out a scalable way to sell this again and again and again? And so scale and sort of business model, I think, was sort of like, next phase. In our case, COVID actually had a huge impact, right? It was, I mean, literally like our business was rocking, everything's up and to the right. And then the pandemic hits, and, you're in the business of like, buy online, return to stores. Well, all of a sudden stores are shut, and no one wants to interact with a human being anymore. And that was, I mean, it was scary and terrifying, because it was like, well, did everything that we've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years, like, just go away? Like, are we actually going to have a business? Will anyone want to do this? And so that was, I think, a whole other kind of phase. Probably not really planned.
Like panic phase.
Yeah. You mentioned the relationship with FedEx Office. I really do think that was a turning point. And that was for a couple of reasons. One, it expanded the network. FedEx Office is considered an essential service. So, during the pandemic, when stores shut, FedEx offices stayed open because people still need to ship stuff. And so it was kind of a way to say, hey, this thing that we built, is going to be viable even in a, if we're living in a world of a pandemic. And it also just, it was just a huge vote of confidence from one of the 2 big players in logistics to say, yeah, we want to embrace this, new idea. So those were kind of like the big, big moments. And then obviously, we went out to raise some more money. Would have been our Series C. So this was like, Q1 2021. And then those conversations ended up turning into the opportunity to join PayPal. And that's kind of been, the last 2 years has really been about, working in a big organization that believes in the business, that gives us the freedom to make investments, to kind of think longer term, really kind of pushes us to think at an enterprise scale, which has just been awesome. Because as an entrepreneur, you tend to be thinking in like 30 days or quarter, or when you're part of PayPal, you really have the luxury of thinking in years and thinking at a level of scale that we never dreamed would be possible. And so it's like the luxury of being part of a big stable company that believes in your business has just been awesome.
So like, I want to go back to a little bit at the beginning when you're thinking if something will work. What do you define like work? Is that like, will people actually go to return? Or is that like, will people like pay you in return? Like, did you sign your first client first? And then my assumption of you as a CEO is you have to take care of like multiple things because you guys are 2B to B2C. So technically you have to find partnership like a FedEx or whatever to like be the inventory station. And then like you have to also sign clients from Everlane or like any kind of retail brand. And then on the other hand, you have to attract the customer to be like, hey, you can return here and stuff like that. So I guess attracting the customer is part of it, or probably from the brands itself. But like that's maybe like you don't have to attract the customer, but you just have to like retain them to create an experience that's like good enough for like people to stay. I'm curious, do you convince the brand first? Do you convince the UPS first? Like how do you make this whole thing work? And then what else do you have to do to get the business started?
So yes, the idea for Happy Returns came from a program that Mark and I worked on together at HoLook. And so HoLook was a flash sale retailer that was acquired by Nordstrom. And HoLook became kind of the nucleus of Nordstrom's online off-price business, what today is NordstromRack.com. And the program that we worked on was letting HoLook shoppers buy online and return to Nordstrom Rack stores. And so the insights that we gained working on that are what led to founding the company. And I think that was, really kind of like an unfair advantage in a way, because it was, we felt like, hey, we know more about this problem than maybe, anyone, because we just lived it. And so, what we're trying to do is sort of replicate this case study, but just do it instead of, inside of an organization for multiple merchants and multiple location partners. Your question around like what do you do first, or like how do you get it going? Like there was always this chicken and egg problem, right? Like I remember really clearly when I was out pitching Everlane, we had one return bar. It was at Santa Monica Place Mall, and Everlane, the CEO of Everlane, Michael President, is a friend. And I had been talking to him about this idea, and as I was fundraising for it, and finally go in to kind of give the pitch, and they're like, okay, so we get it. This is going to be better for our customers. Like, where can they return? It's like, well, today they can return to one place. Like, well, we have customers all over the country. You know that, right? Like, one. And I was like, yes, but like, and so those first relationships tend to be, where you have a personal connection, or where, a leader in one of those businesses just really believes in the problem that you're solving. In our case, it wasn't about cost savings at the beginning. It was really around customer experience. And I think fatigue with the mail and fatigue with like printing shipping labels and waiting to get money back, and knowing that like there really wasn't much that a direct-to-consumer or digitally native brand could do if they didn't have stores to kind of solve this consumer pain point. So those are really, but what we found in building the business was, kind of like the Field of Dreams model, like, build it and they will come. So it was always go get the locations first. The retailers will follow. And so there have been multiple, times in our evolution where, we went out and signed a bunch of malls at the beginning. And then we had to quickly secure merchants to kind of like, have the foot traffic come in. And then, wow, we had a partnership with a company called Paper Source. And all of a sudden we're in, 150 paper sources around the country. Now you got to go, sell more merchants. And so it was always like locations first and then merchants second. Today, we've got 6,000 locations around the country. And what's really neat is as the network has grown, it's really kind of opened up new, and different retailers, right? So when we started, it was, buy online, return to store for retailers without stores. And that meant that our market was really, the digitally native guys only. Well, with 6,000 locations, like, I mean, we're bigger than Walmart, right? We're bigger than most, most companies. And so even if you are an omni-channel retailer that has stores, most don't have 6,000. And so it's kind of opening up a whole new segment of customers for us as the network grows. And as consumer adoption of the service grows, the one kind of North Star that I think we've always, really looked to know if we're succeeding is the customer experience, the shopper experience. When you name the company Happy Returns, you're kind of making a brand promise. And so we literally live and breathe Net Promoter Score. Like if you were to come to one of our team meetings, every week we read, some of the good Net Promoter Score comments and some of the bad, NPS comments. And I think it's like a really helpful reminder that, hey, at the end of the day, like we actually are a service that will impact the experience people have. There's a level of humility in reading the bad ones, right? It's like, we can always get better. There's always improvements to make. We can always, communicate more clearly. We can always fix bugs and I think it's helpful as a team to just always be grounded in that idea that, if we're not delivering on the brand promise that we make and naming the company Happy Returns, like we want to.
You and your co-founder has the unfair advantage of you guys were kind of like the first mover when the hot look was happening about the return was happening in store. And then you guys saw there's like a lot of traction there. But I'm curious, did you study the competitors along the line with whatever you guys were doing? Like, I know Amazon started after you guys started, but is there any other people who are pioneer this kind of concept at the beginning? And then did you chat with them? And then did they share with you what's their finding? Because I think as a founder, you kind of invest your time into building a company and then you don't really know if it works. So I feel like before you invest the time, you probably did a lot more studying before jumping in.
So one of the most powerful things we did at the beginning was we actually did some focus groups. Just called online shoppers into rooms, had some moderated sessions asking them about their experiences with returns. I mean, just some pure gold and pure just awesome insights that came out of that. But what came through was really kind of the passion that people felt about how much the mail didn't work, and how kind of almost insulted people felt about the return experience. That was very, very helpful. You mentioned Amazon, Kohl's. That was a great day for us, right? So to kind of put it in perspective, we were founded in the fall of 2015. We did the first return, Happy Return, in April 2016. And then it wasn't until 18 months later that the Amazon Kohl's partnership was announced. And I'll tell you, it was great because it was like, look, I mean, for 18 months, we've been kind of getting laughed out of rooms, like, wait, how's this going to work? My customers are going to return somewhere else. Like, what are you talking about? And then, the Amazon Kohl's partnership was like, look, this really smart group of people up in Seattle are embracing this thing that we created. And it was helpful from a validation perspective. It was certainly helpful in terms of training shoppers that, hey, you could buy it from one place and return it to another, and that's okay. So that was really important. On the competitor side, it's funny. I think as an entrepreneur, you can spend so many cycles kind of worrying about what your competitors are doing. It's helpful because there are other people that are thinking about the same problem. But at the end of the day, so much just comes down to execution, right? And it's always been about what can we do within the four walls of our company to kind of fulfill our vision? And can we, sign that deal? Can we get that feature out? Can we, improve the marketing to make it more clear kind of who we are and what we do? And so it's like, it can be really distracting to worry too much about your competitive set. What's fun is that when you do hang out with your competitors, there's a mutual respect, I think, and I think an appreciation that hey, we're all trying to create solutions that are solving a similar problem. And it's not like a zero-sum game, right? Multiple people will win, because multiple solutions are required and it's okay, right? And so I think that, it's not, we've never felt like our competitive set were mortal enemies or, we need to, we need to kill them or put them out of business. It's always sort of like, it's helpful to have more people talking about the problem, to try to, like the rising tide, raises all boats.
What does your day look like back in time? And then what does your day look like now? And my question is more like, how do you structure your time? So for example, I'm running my own company. And then like when I'm thinking about my time, it's like, okay, so I would spend, let's say like X amount of time executing, X amount of time training. And then I think most of the time I would spend more time on making money because you want to, the more money the company have, the more people you can hire, the more faster you can grow. Technically, that's like the thinking process. But like, I think that's probably different than like a venture-backed startup because people want to see growth first. And then, as you mentioned, the storytelling is also a big piece, like what kind of milestone you want to achieve for each time when you are raising money. I'm curious, like, how do you budget your time and how do you kind of set up a system when you're like scaling? Because I think hiring would become like a huge part of CEO's job every day due to the company to grow and then like you have to manage the company. How do you kind of like budget your time every day?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll sort of talk philosophy first, and then we kind of get to more tactical with calendar. So, I think, when I think about like management philosophy or like my job, it's really around like a couple things. So, the right people in the right seats. And so it sort of starts with, there's an adage, from business school, like structure follows strategy. So, what is it that we're trying to accomplish and why is that important? And then have we organized our team around those things? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about sort of design of the organization, the people who are in those roles and making sure that we have like the skills set and the motivation that we need. And by the way, like strategy changes. So it's okay to kind of wreck and rebuild your organization, sometimes, or move things around because, if your structure and your strategy are disconnected, then you won't accomplish the things you want to accomplish. So that's kind of, thought one. Thought two is, I think the job of a leader is really to kind of make the objectives clear. And so, and you kind of think about it cascading down, like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish as a business? So for example, like, we just had an entire team meeting that was around our revenue goal. And we literally kind of broke it down into, okay, well, how do we generate revenue? Right. and okay, like, and what are the components of that? And sort of like a profit tree model to kind of go down to, we have existing customers that we have to serve and we have to renew. And then we have new customers we have to sell to. And how do we sell to the new customer? And so like, and the hope in doing that is that you can take the big objectives of the company and break them down into smaller elements that everyone can kind of relate to. Because like, if you're doing this well, people understand, hey, this thing that I'm doing today actually is important to us achieving this larger objective as a company, right? And so it's sort of like breaking the objectives down into things that everyone can understand. Then the next one I think is really, if you've done the first one, you have the right people in the right seats. If you've made the objectives clear, what I find is that then a lot of times it's, kind of getting out of the way, right? So, are you the right person for the job? Do you understand what we need you to do? Do you understand how we're going to measure your success? Great. Now I'm going to kind of get out of your way, right? I'm not going to be prescriptive about telling you how to do it. I'm going to make sure that you understand what you need to do. But I'm going to support you. And so, a lot of time in one-on-ones, a lot of time, how are you doing against those objectives? Like, how can I help? What's preventing us from succeeding? Trying to, break bottlenecks or make sure that resources are allocated toward areas where maybe, we have, we're less likely to succeed in something that we're trying to do. But getting out of the way is actually quite important, right? So, in terms of like structuring my day, like, my day will have, a bunch of components to it. There are certain meetings where it's my job to lead and my job to inform. There are certain meetings where it's really more collaborative problem solving. There are lots of one-on-ones. I always say to my directs, like, this is your time. right? Like, you understand your objectives. This is your time. So I don't have an agenda here, but you better, right? Because if you don't, I'm just going to start drilling in. And so I think people, that work with me kind of realize like, okay, I need to be the one driving the conversation with David. And I also like, here's my chance to like ask him for help and to get things that I want. Either, hey, I have a problem, love your opinion on how to solve it, or, can you help me, I'm having an impasse somewhere in the organization. Can you help me unblock it? But it's really like creating the support structure for the people, in the team to succeed. One of my early managers used to talk about like it was your job as the manager to like create room for people, a safe room, meaning like things that they can accomplish, but not be too prescriptive about telling them how to do it, because that's super demotivating. And so a lot of times it's just kind of getting out of the way.
Do you typically hire the people who with work experience, or do you typically hire people who are like young and hungry, but like they've never done XYZ before?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the job and the sort of stage of the business. There are certain areas where you need seasoned, practitioners, right? So sales is an example. What I found over the course of selling Happy Returns is that I'm really just I'm not a good salesperson. Good sales is really around repeatable process and discipline, right? And I don't tend to have those things. I'm kind of like, yeah, I'll tell you what all about the business that I could, but it's also around really good listening and making sure that before you start talking about, you understand what problems your customers are trying to solve. So that's an area where I think, we made a hire he's a great sales practitioner. He's a great leader. He's a great motivator of people. But it's all within a system that is scalable, repeatable, and then, hey, if it's not working, what do we need to tweak in this process? So that's an area where like you really need experience, someone that's been there, done that. There are other roles where, we talk sometimes about like a general athlete, like, someone that, hey, we may not even know what we need in this job, but we just need somebody smart that's going to go in and figure it out. We need somebody that can be adaptable. I think a lot of startup stuff is people that are comfortable with, they're comfortable being uncomfortable, like comfortable, like not knowing necessarily what the plan is, or comfortable that the plan might change day to day, or comfortable that, hey, this thing that we thought we were going to do, it's not working. So now we need to do this totally other thing. Like, you're able to deal with that. So, it really kind of depends on the job and the role and sort of the maturity of the idea, in terms of like who you're hiring for, but to your question, like in the early days, yeah, you got to sell people on the mission. Like they have to believe in the mission, because you're probably not going to be able to pay, what somebody could earn working at a big company. They have to believe in the mission, and i.e., they have to believe that the equity that they're getting is going to be worth it. And I think ultimately, like, people want to work in a fun culture as well, right? They want, most people want to win. And, if you can, explain to them that it's going to be fun and that, we're going to win together, I think that's a really powerful, kind of attractor that, oftentimes, people they want to be part of a winning team. And it doesn't always have to be like a team that's going to pay me the most. It's a team that I'm going to have fun with and that I'm going to win with. That really can be the motivator, in the early days when you can't, pay what a Google or a PayPal could pay.
In terms of like hiring technical talent, since I think most venture-backed company have to have like a technical component in there to scale the company. Like, we chat about you are an English major. So I'm curious, like, how do you find the technical partner? I know that you guys worked together in the past, but how do you manage the technical aspect to make sure that like everything is following on track? And then same as the sales side. So I consider both of them are like subjects expertise or like technical subject expertise. How do you set the realistic benchmark for these people to execute, and then making sure that they're not telling you, okay, so we can only achieve 5 out of 10 instead of like 8 out of 10. And then how do you kind of like manage these progress when you are starting the company?
I'm really lucky that I had Mark as a co-founder. He's not only an amazing product leader, but he also like actually understands the technology at a level that I think, many don't. So it was awesome to sort of defer, much of that to him. I think another one of his terrific skills is in hiring. The hiring process is so important. Ours is very rigorous. So like, as an example, on the technical side, there's a coding test. There are coding problems that engineers are required to complete before we have, we kind of invest in interview number one. That kind of testing or exercise is something that we've sort of deployed elsewhere in the business. And oftentimes it's a real exercise. It's like, hey, this is what we're going to ask you to do in this job. So like, tell us what your plan is for the first 30 days. Or, we'll give them a data set and say, tell us the insights of what's happening here in this, with this data for something that's actually relevant to your, to your job. You really, I think what you're trying to do is ensure that people can kind of clear the bar, competence wise. And then after that, then it becomes around more things like fit and motivation. And, just from a hiring perspective, I've often said, like, talented people always have options. So the key is to try to figure out, like, once they've kind of cleared the bar competence wise, is this a good fit? And a lot of that will be, what is it that the person wants to get out of this next phase of their career? If we can't offer that, then it's probably not a good fit. Right. And so really kind of hearing from them, like, what is it that you want? And sometimes it's, hey, I want to manage, or, I want to be part of the company at this stage, or, it's really important to me that I have this kind of balance in my work life. So really trying to understand what's motivating the person, because again, like, if you are talented, like, there are many options for you. And so it's really about sort of like that match, can we offer this person what they are looking for in the next phase of their career? Those are the best kinds of employees, right?
Totally.
So, and again, I think, there's a level of humility that is required to succeed as an entrepreneur, like knowing what you don't know, trusting people that do. I wouldn't know a great engineer from a good engineer based on things like the results of the coding test, but I know we have people that do, and you really have to sort of defer to their judgment and say, hey, is this an area where, where my opinion matters, where I'm informed or not? If not, then I need to make sure I've hired people and I've empowered them to make decisions.
As a founder myself, I feel like it's really hard after you train someone and then they leave the next year and then you have to train the next person. I'm curious, what is like a system that you set up for your company to making sure the company is self-run in different departments?
Well, I mean, I think some of it is around kind of compensation philosophy. Some of it is around sort of the distribution of responsibility. So, on the compensation philosophy, we've always felt like what was really important was that we were paying, a wage that we thought was reflective of the value that the role. So not, hey, what did you make in your last job? And so we're gonna, right. But literally, like, okay, we think that someone that's succeeding in this role should get paid X because of the value that they're going to create for the company. And really kind of like start with that rather than who are the candidates and how much did they make it for, right? The other point is, when you find the winners, like when you find the people who are succeeding, when you find the people that are, then it's your job to keep them motivated through additional compensation, right? So, we're now part of PayPal. We work through kind of PayPal's rhythms with this, but as a startup, layering additional option grants on the people that were succeeding was really important. It's kind of like, hey, if we found someone that we want to be part of this long term, they're doing great. Like, let's make sure that we continue to reward them and continue to make sure that they have a big stake in what we're doing. I think the same goes for responsibility. Like, if you're competent and you're succeeding at a startup, like, responsibility just sort of flows to you. I think one of the hard parts is the founder is like giving stuff up, especially like if it's something that you think you're good at, right? It's like hard to kind of give it up. Say, great, I used to do this thing and I think I'm really good at it, and now I'm going to give it to somebody else. But like, you kind of have to, if you're succeeding, there should always be other things that require your time. And so you should, you kind of have to get used to this idea that it's great if this person can take on more. It's great if this thing that I used to do that I thought I was really good at, I can give to somebody else to do, because that's going to free me up to do this other important thing for the company. So from a kind of scope of responsibility, like, yeah, the way to keep people is to just continue to expand, their role and their contribution. And most people are eager for it, right? Most of the high performers want that kind of recognition, want that ability to grow. And sometimes they're challenges, they're like new challenges for someone. Hey, I know you've never done this before, but you're succeeding over here, and we need someone to take this on. And we think that your pattern of success in this area should translate into this other new discipline that we're handing you.
What are some roles that like a CEO should never give up? And then what are some responsibility that you feel you should like defer right away?
I think you should never give up kind of the role, like speaking to the team. I think it's really important to kind of constantly be in a dialogue with the employees. I think there are certain kind of customer relationships. Even though I've kind of admitted that I suck at sales, like there are times when it's effective to kind of have me, parachute in and kind of help, close deals. There's certain relationships that just shouldn't defer, right? Because it's between you and a partner, and it's just always important to maintain that. You can augment with other people. You can have other folks kind of run the day-to-day, but staying involved, because so much of this is sort of personal relationships. As a venture funded business, it's sort of your job to manage the board. I don't think you can really, defer that to someone else. Although I think a big part of that is learning how to ask for help from your board, and learning, this isn't just like a status update. This is about, hey, these are the problems that I need your collective brain power to solve. And that same kind of goes for, working in a big company like PayPal, right? It's my job to kind of be communicating up. It's my job to be asking for help. It's my job to, there's certain messages, positive and negative, that are, most impactfully delivered by me as opposed to others. I think that never goes away. It's just the audience, may change depending on the stage of the company you're in.
You guys were acquired by PayPal, and then when the acquisition were happening, I'm curious, like, what was your thoughts on the proposition between you guys to PayPal, as well as like how will PayPal help you guys to grow into something even bigger? Curious, what does the business side of things look like in terms of being acquired to another company?
Well, I think there's so many similarities between Happy Returns and PayPal, and I think we both mutually kind of recognize that. When you think about, like, we're both B2B2C, we both really value the relationship on the B2C side, and understand how important, that relationship is. They serve merchants, but, interact with consumers. Like, we're kind of the same thing. The other place that I think we're very similar is that, ultimately, why did PayPal, grow? It was to sort of remove the payment friction that unlocked, trust and confidence in e-commerce. I think when the history of e-commerce is written someday, there will be a chapter all about payments and all about everything that PayPal did to, solve that problem for shoppers, solve that problem for merchants, and really build, the trusted brand in that. Other chapters would probably be around, Google helping, solve search problems, and eBay, harnessing the power of community, or, around things that people are passionate about. Amazon and Prime kind of, letting us know what's possible with delivery, right? Consistency and speed. I'd love to think that Happy Returns will be, the company that is sort of a chapter on returns, and really, like, what do all those chapters have in common? It's about sort of removing friction from the experience, and taking something which was hard to do and making it easy and delightful. So I think, PayPal, there were just so many similarities in terms of, like, the way we thought about the world. This idea of kind of two sides to your marketplace, the importance of the consumer relationship. And I think, the vision that Dan Schulman has kind of painted is that, payments is at the core, but there are all of these additional services, both for shoppers as well as for merchants, before the transaction and after the transaction, that, what do merchants want? Well, they want someone to help with all that. What do shoppers want? They want, brands they can trust throughout, each component of that journey. And so, that's kind of where we fit in, is the nucleus of PayPal's sort of post-transaction effort and all the services that one can build into the PayPal experience today to try to reinforce the things that PayPal stands for around, a brand that you can trust with your money. Should be a brand, that you can trust with things like handling your returns. So we're, it's been an awesome experience to be part of PayPal. As I said earlier, I think, having a parent company that is pushing you to think bigger, to think at scale, to think longer term, and sort of, gives you the space also to operate and to succeed, is just, it's been terrific.
At the end, we have a 1-minute little fire round for you. Okay, so the number one question is, what's your favorite book?
Catcher in the Rye.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
My wife.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
I'd invite Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg over for dinner.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Well, I've got 2 kids, so probably on the side of the soccer field or the lacrosse field.
The last question is, what company or like an idea would you enjoy investing in today?
I think there's some really neat, obviously AI, but the kind of applications of AI. I think there's some really neat things that are being done with kind of visual AI. Like as a former marketer, I'm so used to like this idea of like A/B testing everything, like A/B testing copy, A/B testing images, like the idea that you can take machines and do all of that before, I can remember like photo shoots, right? Photo shoot and sit around the conference room and, pick the 3 or 4 images that everyone likes. And then you test those, right? But what about the other 20 images that, like, why shouldn't the machine help you make that decision rather than just kind of trusting human instinct? So things like that, I think are super powerful. And there are a couple of companies that are really kind of tackling that problem in a unique way. Those are the, using artificial intelligence to try to like make better decisions in business, I think is super powerful. And it really just becomes about like getting more leverage for yourself, when AI can kind of help you with that.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, David, for sharing with us. And then thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Grace. I had fun.
Thanks for tuning into Smart Venture Podcast. If you learned something from the episode or even just mildly tolerated me, please subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. I promise to keep bringing you more successful, insightful interviews and insider tips about startups. Remember, sharing is caring. So tell your friends to listen to, or enemies. I won't judge. Until next time, keep venturing smartly.